In the heart of Detroit, a city once famous for roaring engines and factory smoke, lived Alex Turner, a 27-year-old mechanic with calloused hands and a weary smile. His garage wasn't much to look at, just a small workshop tucked between shuttered storefronts and an abandoned warehouse. Yet, inside those walls, Alex poured his soul into machines, fixing one rusted car at a time to barely make rent. Most nights stretched late into the early hours, the sound of his tools echoing through the empty streets. To him, the garage was more than a workplace. It was a place of hope and survival. On a particularly chilly evening, as Alex locked up the garage and brushed grease off his palms, something caught his attention. Across the cracked pavement, under the flickering glow of a broken streetlight, he noticed a young woman being wheeled down the sidewalk. She was slender, pale from long struggles, her brown hair falling around tired yet beautiful eyes. Her name, he would later learn, was Emily Carter. She couldn't walk, her legs lay still, lifeless, as her younger brother pushed her chair forward with visible effort. The chair itself was old and squeaky, barely holding together. Every bump in the uneven sidewalk made it jolt uncomfortably, causing Emily to wince. Alex stood frozen, his chest tightening at the sight. He had fixed countless machines in his life, but here, in front of him, was something broken that went far beyond bolts and screws. He watched as Emily clutched the arms of the wheelchair, trying to hide her discomfort. Her brother muttered words of encouragement, but his own frustration was evident. For a moment, Alex felt an ache that was deeply personal, almost as though fate had placed this scene in front of him. He knew that look of helplessness. He had seen it in his mother's eyes years ago, when she battled an illness they couldn't afford to treat. That memory stirred something inside him, a determination stronger than anything he'd felt in years. He wanted to help her, not with pity, not with hollow words, but with the only thing he had ever been good at, building and fixing. That night, instead of heading home, Alex unlocked the garage once more. The air inside was cold, tools scattered, engine parts stacked in corners, and the smell of oil thick in the room. He sat down heavily on the stool, running a hand through his messy hair, and let the idea take shape in his mind. What if he could give Emily more than just a repaired wheelchair? What if he could build her something entirely new, something that could return a piece of freedom she thought was gone forever? With that thought, Alex's fatigue faded into purpose. He began gathering parts from old vehicles he had kept for scraps, an unused transmission lever, lightweight steel frames, and gears that most mechanics would have tossed in the trash. Piece by piece, he sketched and assembled, driven by a fire that made him forget the hunger gnawing at his stomach. This wasn't just about metal and wires. It was about giving someone back their dignity. Emily didn't know it yet, but her life was about to collide with his in ways neither of them could have imagined. For hours, Alex worked in silence, save for the clanking of his tools. He envisioned a small car, compact enough to maneuver city streets, but designed with a special feature: hand controls. Emily wouldn't need her legs. Instead, she could accelerate, brake, and steer with her hands alone. It would be more than just transportation. It would be independence, a chance to feel normal again. He knew such inventions existed in expensive medical catalogs, priced so high only the wealthy could afford them. But he didn't care about patents or profits. His only goal was to create something she could use, no matter what it cost him. The first night bled into morning, and Alex's garage looked like chaos to an outsider. But to him, every scattered part was a step closer to something extraordinary. Sweat clung to his forehead, grease stained his clothes, yet he kept going, fueled by determination. When exhaustion finally hit, he collapsed onto a pile of old seat cushions, falling asleep to the smell of gasoline and metal. His dreams were filled not with cars, but with the image of Emily's hopeful eyes, the kind of look he wished to see one day when she realized she wasn't bound by her chair anymore. The following days became a blur of effort and sacrifice. Alex skipped meals, ignoring the rumble in his stomach just to afford the parts he couldn't salvage. He borrowed tools from a fellow mechanic across town, trading free repairs for spare supplies. Some nights he worked until his hands trembled so badly he could barely hold a wrench. Yet he refused to give up. He remembered Emily's quiet expression, the way she held back her pain with dignity, and that was enough to push him forward. To him, this wasn't charity, it was justice, a way to fight back against the cruelty of fate. Outside the garage, life carried on. People walked past without knowing what was happening inside those grimy walls. To them, Alex was just another struggling young man trying to make ends meet in a city that had lost much of its shine. But deep down, he knew he was building something more significant than any repair job he had ever taken. This was about rewriting someone's story, even if it was only one person's. He couldn't save the world, but maybe he could save a single life from the weight of despair. That thought kept him alive through the sleepless nights. Weeks into the project, Alex had constructed the frame of the small car. It was lightweight, sleek, and compact, with adjustments for Emily's comfort. He spent hours testing the hand control system, making sure it was smooth and intuitive. Each time it worked correctly, he smiled to himself, imagining her hands gripping the wheel, her laughter filling the air as she moved freely again. Every detail mattered. The seat was cushioned to avoid strain, the controls were positioned at just the right height, and the safety locks ensured she could enter and exit easily without assistance. This wasn't just a vehicle, it was freedom, disguised as metal and mechanics. At times, doubt crept in. Who was he to think he could change someone's life? He was just a poor mechanic, a man scraping by with nothing but grit. What if Emily didn't trust him? What if she refused to even try his creation? But every time those fears threatened to stop him, he shook them off and returned to work. It wasn't about recognition. It wasn't about whether she thanked him or not. It was about giving her a chance, even if she never knew his name. That kind of selflessness was rare, but Alex believed it was the only way to live with dignity. One night, as the rain poured heavily outside, Alex tightened the final bolts on the steering system. He sat back, chest heaving with exhaustion, staring at the unfinished but promising vehicle in front of him. The storm outside mirrored his own turmoil, uncertainty, fear, but also hope. He thought of Emily again, the way her brother had struggled to push that chair, the way she had clenched her hands to mask her pain. That memory was enough to steel his resolve. He whispered to himself, "This is for her. She deserves better." And so Alex continued, night after night, turning his small, dimly lit garage into a place where miracles were forged from rust and determination. Emily had no idea that a stranger had taken her struggle into his heart, working tirelessly to give her a gift that no money could buy. For Alex, this wasn't about being a hero, it was about doing what was right. And though the world outside remained indifferent, inside that garage, something extraordinary was taking shape, destined to change both their lives forever. Weeks had passed since Alex first began his project, and now, at last, the creation stood proudly in the middle of his garage. The small, custom-built car gleamed faintly under the dim overhead light, a mix of polished steel and recycled parts carefully pieced together. Every detail spoke of late nights, missed meals, and quiet determination. But Alex had poured his very soul into it, and though his hands were sore and his body exhausted, his heart raced with anticipation. Tonight, he was finally ready to show Emily what he had built. He didn't know if she would accept it, but deep inside he hoped it would change her world. When Emily arrived with her brother, she wasn't expecting anything unusual. She had simply come to thank Alex once again for fixing her old wheelchair weeks earlier. But when Alex pulled back the tarp that covered the small car, her breath caught in her throat. Her eyes widened, her lips parted, and for a moment she was too stunned to speak. The machine wasn't ordinary. It was compact yet sleek, designed with care, and most importantly, it looked like freedom. She clutched the armrest of her chair, trembling with disbelief. Is this for
Me?
She whispered, her voice shaking as though afraid the answer might disappear. Alex nodded quietly, his expression humble, almost shy. It's yours, built so you can drive it with your hands, he said, gesturing toward the custom controls. Emily's brother gasped, his eyes lighting up as he circled the car in awe. Emily, however, was frozen. She blinked rapidly, her heart pounding. For so long she had accepted a life of limitations, of being pushed around, dependent on others. And now in front of her sat a possibility she thought she had lost forever. With tears threatening to spill, she reached out and touched the cool metal of the door, her fingers trembling as though touching something sacred. It took her a few moments to gather courage, but with Alex's gentle encouragement, Emily slowly transferred from her wheelchair into the driver's seat. Her movements were unsteady, but determination pushed her forward. When she finally settled into the cushioned seat, her breath shuddered out, half laughter, half sob. She placed her hands on the custom-made levers and steering system, her palms damp with nerves. Alex crouched beside her, explaining softly how each control worked, how the braking system responded, how the acceleration would feel. Emily nodded, though her eyes were glassy with tears. She had imagined so many things over the years walking. Dancing, running, but driving on her own had never seemed possible until now. Her brother stood by, holding his breath, eyes wide as Alex stepped back and gave her space. "Whenever you're ready," he said gently. Emily swallowed hard, gripped the controls, and pressed forward. The car responded instantly, rolling out of the garage with a smooth hum. Gasps filled the air. Her brother cheered loudly, his voice echoing through the street. Emily's laugh burst free, raw and unrestrained, as tears streamed down her cheeks. The wind touched her hair as she drove forward, not fast, just steady, but every second was filled with something she hadn't felt in years: independence. For the first time since her accident, she wasn't being pushed, she was moving herself. The sight was overwhelming. Neighbors who happened to be outside stopped to watch, their faces a mixture of astonishment and admiration. Emily maneuvered the small car around the block, her laughter ringing out like a melody long forgotten. When she returned to the garage, her cheeks glistened with tears, but her eyes shone brighter than ever before. She looked at Alex, who stood there covered in grease, his tired eyes watching quietly, and whispered, "You gave me my life back." Her brother hugged her tightly, unable to contain his own emotions. Alex, however, simply smiled, his chest swelling with quiet pride. He didn't need thanks. Seeing her joy was more than enough. That night, as the excitement settled, Emily lingered in the garage with Alex. Her brother had gone to fetch food, leaving the two of them in the quiet hum of the fluorescent lights. Emily's expression shifted, her hands fidgeting in her lap as though wrestling with a heavy secret. Finally, she exhaled shakily. "There's something I need to tell you," she said softly. Alex tilted his head, wiping his hands with an oily rag, sensing her nervousness. "What is it?" he asked, his tone calm. Emily hesitated, her eyes meeting his. "I'm not just any girl in a broken wheelchair. My father is Robert Carter." The name landed like thunder in the room. Alex froze, blinking in disbelief. Robert Carter, the tech magnate, one of the most influential entrepreneurs in America, was known across the country. His face appeared in magazines. His company dominated headlines. His wealth built empires. And now Emily was saying she was his daughter? Alex's first instinct was denial. He shook his head, muttering, "That can't be true." But Emily's steady gaze, mixed with the vulnerability in her voice, told him otherwise. She explained that she had hidden her identity, deliberately, tired of people treating her differently once they knew who her father was. Some had pretended to care, but all they wanted was money, power, or access to her family's fortune. Alex's heart pounded as he processed her words. He had built the car out of selflessness, with no expectation of reward. Yet now, everything suddenly felt heavier, more complicated. He wasn't sure what to say. "Why didn't you tell me?" he finally asked, his voice quieter than before. Emily smiled faintly, though it was tinged with sadness. "Because if I had, you might not have seen me for who I am. You would have seen the name, the wealth, not Emily, the girl who just wanted a chance at freedom." Her words pierced him deeply, and for a moment silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant sound of rain hitting the pavement outside. Alex looked at her, truly looked at her, not as the daughter of a billionaire, not as a woman bound to a wheelchair, but as someone who had trusted him with her truth. He nodded slowly. "It doesn't change anything," he said firmly. "I built this for you, not for Robert Carter's daughter, but for Emily. That's all that matters." Emily's eyes glistened, relief washing over her face. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen for who she truly was, not the label tied to her family's name. She smiled through her tears, whispering, "Thank you." As the night wore on, the revelation lingered like an unspoken weight between them. Alex sat back on his stool, staring at the car, while Emily remained in the seat, her hands gently stroking the controls. She knew her secret had changed the dynamic between them, but she hoped it hadn't ruined the bond they had built. For Alex, the shock was still raw, but beneath it, there was a stronger feeling: pride. Because wealth or status aside, he had done something no one else had. He had given her back hope without ever asking for anything in return. Outside, the city lights of Detroit flickered against the night sky, unaware of the small miracle that had taken place in a shabby garage. A mechanic and a millionaire's daughter sat together, bound not by money or status, but by compassion and a shared belief that sometimes the most extraordinary changes come from the simplest acts of kindness. And though Alex didn't yet realize it, Emily's secret was only the beginning of a story that would soon reach far beyond the walls of his little workshop. Emily's confession could have shifted everything between them, but instead of creating distance, it built an unexpected bridge. Alex didn't see her as the daughter of a billionaire. He still saw her as Emily, the young woman whose laughter had lit up the street when she first drove the car he built. That very night, after the truth spilled out, she made a bold suggestion. She wanted him to meet her father. Alex hesitated at first, his stomach tightening at the thought of standing in front of one of the most powerful men in America. Yet there was something in Emily's gaze, full of quiet assurance, that convinced him to agree. The following weekend, Alex found himself nervously waiting in the lobby of the Carter family's sprawling estate just outside Detroit. Marble floors gleamed beneath his worn shoes. Crystal chandeliers hung above him, and everywhere he looked he saw wealth he could never have imagined. He felt completely out of place, a grease-stained mechanic standing in a palace of polished perfection. Yet when Robert Carter entered the room, there was no arrogance in his expression. The older man's eyes softened immediately when he saw Emily, who wheeled herself forward with a smile. Then Robert turned to Alex, studying him carefully, as though weighing his character in silence before extending a firm hand. "Emily told me everything," Robert said, his voice steady, carrying the authority of a man used to commanding boardrooms and building empires. Alex braced himself for judgment, perhaps even dismissal, but instead Robert's next words left him stunned. "You gave my daughter something money never could. Independence. For that, I'll always be grateful." Alex shifted awkwardly, his cheeks flushing as he muttered that he hadn't done it for thanks. Emily smiled, watching the two men connect. Her father wasn't easily moved, but this time he was. But the sincerity in Alex's actions struck Robert deeper than any polished business deal ever had. After a few moments of quiet reflection, Robert gestured toward Alex to sit. He asked questions not about wealth, not about ambitions, but about the car, the mechanics, and how Alex had managed to build something so innovative with scraps and determination alone. Alex explained the design, the custom hand controls, and the thought process behind it. Robert listened intently, nodding slowly, clearly impressed. Then, almost casually, he asked, "Have you ever considered doing this on a larger scale, helping not just Emily, but thousands of others across the country?" Alex blinked in surprise, unsure how to respond. His dream had always been small, grounded in survival and keeping his garage afloat. But Robert's words planted a possibility in his mind that felt larger than life. Emily, sitting nearby, leaned forward eagerly. "Dad, he could change so many lives," she said. "People like me who feel trapped, this could give them freedom." Robert looked between his daughter and the young mechanic. He saw the hope in Emily's eyes, a hope he hadn't seen since before her accident. And in Alex, he saw honesty, grit, and a rare kind of selflessness. After a long pause, Robert finally declared, "I'll fund it. Whatever resources you need, you'll have them." Alex sat in stunned silence, the weight of the words pressing down on him. This wasn't just charity, it was an opportunity that could redefine his life and countless others. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. Robert invested heavily, transforming Alex's modest garage into a state-of-the-art workshop. Engineers, designers, and technicians were brought in, but Alex remained at the helm, his vision guiding every decision. He refused to let the project lose its soul. For him, it wasn't about building machines to make a profit. It was about restoring dignity to those who felt forgotten. Emily visited often, testing prototypes, giving feedback, and reminding everyone that behind the mechanics, there were real human lives being impacted. Slowly, word spread. Newspapers covered the story of a humble mechanic teaming up with a tech tycoon's daughter to revolutionize mobility. The response was overwhelming. Families reached out from every corner of the country, some sharing heartbreaking stories of loved ones who had lost independence, others offering gratitude for the hope Alex's project brought them. Social media exploded with praise, hailing Alex as a hero who had turned compassion into innovation. He was invited to conferences, featured in articles, and celebrated by people who once would have never noticed him. But through it all, Alex remained grounded. He still lived in his small apartment, still worked late nights with grease on his hands, and still insisted that the joy on people's faces was the only reward he needed. Emily, too, experienced a transformation. Driving her custom car became more than just transportation, it became a symbol of resilience. She was no longer defined by pity or whispered sympathy. Instead, she became an advocate, speaking at events alongside Alex, sharing her story to inspire others. Together, they became a team, not bound by wealth, status, or even circumstance, but by a shared mission to remind the world that kindness could spark miracles. Emily often told reporters, "Alex didn't see me as a problem to fix or as Robert Carter's daughter. He saw me as Emily. That's why this matters so much." For Robert, watching his daughter thrive again brought a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. He had built empires, created fortunes, but nothing compared to seeing Emily regain her confidence and joy. He admired Alex's humility, his refusal to be swayed by fame or money. In many ways, Robert realized Alex had taught him a lesson too, that real value lies not in stock prices or company expansions, but in the lives touched by genuine compassion. Robert quietly supported the growing company, but he always let Alex lead, respecting the authenticity that had made the project possible in the first place. Months later, the first official line of vehicles was unveiled at a public event in New York. The stage was set with banners, cameras flashing, and crowds gathered. When Emily drove onto the stage in one of the cars, the audience erupted in applause. She smiled confidently, waving to the crowd, while Alex stood off to the side, his hands stuffed in his pockets. Overwhelmed by the response, reporters rushed forward, microphones thrust toward him, asking how it felt to go from a small garage mechanic to the founder of a life-changing company. Alex simply replied, "It's never been about me, it's about giving people back the freedom they deserve." The story spread across the nation like wildfire. News outlets ran features, communities held fundraisers, and thousands volunteered to support the initiative. Letters poured in, some from parents thanking Alex for giving their children hope, others from veterans who longed for independence after injuries. Each story fueled his determination, reminding him why he had started this journey in the first place. What began as a single act of kindness in a shabby Detroit garage had blossomed into a movement, touching lives far beyond anything Alex could have imagined. And through it all, Emily remained by his side, not as a symbol of wealth or pity, but as his equal partner, his reminder of why he had chosen to act in the first place. Late one evening, after the chaos of the public launch had quieted, Alex and Emily sat together in the workshop. The hum of machines filled the background as Emily looked at him with a soft smile. "Do you realize what you've done?" she asked quietly. Alex shrugged, wiping grease from his hands. "I just built a car," he said with a faint grin. But Emily shook her head, her eyes shimmering. "No, Alex, you changed lives. You changed mine. And you showed the world that sometimes the people society overlooks are the ones who hold the power to make the biggest difference." Alex paused, his chest tightening with emotion, realizing the truth of her words. In that moment, surrounded by the tools of his trade and the echoes of their shared journey, Alex understood that his life had shifted forever, not because of wealth, not because of recognition, but because he had chosen kindness without expectation. Emily's secret had opened doors he never could have dreamed of, but it was his heart, his humanity that had carried him through. The world would remember his name, but Alex knew that wasn't the point. What mattered was the ripple of change, spreading outward proof that the smallest gestures born of compassion could grow into miracles that touched countless souls.